The day you realize the person you were pretending to hate is the person you never wanted to lose is the day everything changes. Ethan Parker never believed a stupid college dare could rewrite his entire future, but that was before Ryan Mitchell looked across a crowded room and made him forget every clever comeback he had ever prepared. Before that night, Ryan was just the guy everyone noticed, and Ethan tried not to. Ryan was the star basketball player with the confident smile, the perfect grades, and the kind of calm presence that made people naturally move aside when he walked through campus. Ethan was the opposite. He was the guy carrying too many sketchbooks, spilling coffee on his own sleeves, and making jokes whenever he felt nervous. If embarrassment had a championship trophy, Ethan was pretty sure he would have won it every year. He and Ryan were not friends. They were barely even friendly. Ethan thought Ryan was too serious, too polished, and probably too comfortable being admired by everyone around him. Ryan seemed to think Ethan was a walking distraction with a talent for turning simple conversations into unpredictable adventures. So when they both ended up at the same university party on a Friday night, neither expected the evening to become a memory they would replay over and over. The apartment was filled with music, laughter, and the usual chaos of college students trying to forget their responsibilities for a few hours. Ethan stood near the kitchen counter with a soda in his hand, watching his friends play a ridiculous game of truth or dare. He was perfectly happy staying out of the spotlight. That plan lasted about 3 minutes. "I dare you to do something you would never normally do," his friend Marcus said with a grin. Ethan immediately knew he was in trouble. "That sounds suspiciously like a terrible idea," Ethan replied. Everyone laughed, but then someone looked toward Ryan. "Pick someone." The room suddenly became louder and quieter at the same time. Ethan felt every pair of eyes turn in his direction. "No way," Ethan said, already knowing exactly what they were thinking. Ryan raised an eyebrow from across the room. "Are they seriously choosing us?" Ethan laughed awkwardly. "Apparently my biggest mistake tonight was standing near a couch." The joke made everyone laugh, but Ryan surprised him by walking closer. "Relax," Ryan said softly. "It's just a dare." Somehow, that made Ethan even more nervous. Because Ryan was not laughing. He was looking at Ethan like he was actually paying attention. The moment passed quickly, but something about it stayed. The challenge was supposed to be meaningless. A funny story. A random college memory. Nothing more. But when Ethan looked back later, he realized that was the exact moment everything started changing. Not because of the dare itself, but because for the first time, Ryan Mitchell was no longer just the person Ethan thought he knew. He was someone Ethan wanted to understand. And that was the part that scared him most. The next morning, Ethan Parker woke up and immediately wished he could rewind the last 12 hours of his life. Not because anything terrible had happened, but because his brain had decided to replay one very specific moment over and over again. Ryan Mitchell looking at him. Ryan Mitchell walking toward him. Ryan Mitchell acting like the entire room had disappeared. It was ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. Ethan buried his face in his pillow and sighed. It was just a dare, he reminded himself. A completely normal, completely meaningless college dare. The problem was, his heart did not seem interested in listening. By the time Ethan arrived on campus, he had convinced himself that everything would go back to normal. Ryan would return to being the popular athlete everyone admired. Ethan would return to being the guy who spent most of his time in the art building and occasionally forgot where he parked his car. Simple. Easy. Except nothing felt simple when Ryan walked into the student center that afternoon. Ethan was sitting with his sketchbook open, pretending to work, when he noticed the shadow beside his table. He looked up and immediately froze. "You always draw when you are avoiding conversations?" Ryan asked. Ethan blinked. "You always start conversations by making people question their life choices." Ryan almost smiled. Almost. It was the smallest change in his expression, but Ethan noticed. And for some reason, that tiny reaction felt like winning something he did not even know he was competing for. Ryan sat across from him without asking. That alone was strange. Ryan Mitchell did not usually sit with random people. People came to him. "About last night," Ryan said. Ethan immediately closed his sketchbook. "If this is the part where you say we should never speak of it again, I already prepared a dramatic speech about moving to another state and changing my name." Ryan looked confused for a second. "You were planning to change your name?" "Maybe." Ethan Parker sounds too recognizable now. Ryan let out a quiet laugh, and Ethan stopped talking. because he had never heard that sound before. Ryan was always composed, always controlled. Seeing him laugh felt like discovering a secret room in a familiar house. I was going to say we should not let everyone else decide what that moment meant, Ryan said. Ethan looked at him carefully. And what did it mean? For a second, Ryan did not answer. His usual confidence disappeared, replaced by something more honest. I do not know yet. That answer surprised Ethan more than anything else could have. Ryan Mitchell, the person everyone thought had everything figured out, admitted he did not know. Over the next few days, things became strangely different. They started talking more. Not because they had to, but because neither of them seemed ready to end the conversation. Ethan learned that Ryan secretly loved old movies and hated crowded places. Ryan learned that Ethan always carried extra pens because he expected everyone else to lose theirs. Small things, ordinary things. But somehow, those little details started building something neither of them expected. Then came Friday afternoon. Ethan was leaving the art building when he saw Ryan waiting outside. "You are following me now?" Ethan joked. Ryan shook his head. "No, I was hoping I could ask you something." Ethan smiled. "That sounds serious." Ryan looked away for a moment before saying, "Would you want to go somewhere with me this weekend?" Not because of the dare. Not because people are watching. Ethan felt his confidence disappear completely. Because for the first time, Ryan was not playing along. He was choosing him. And that was far more confusing than any challenge could have been. For the first time in years, Ryan Mitchell looked nervous, and Ethan Parker had no idea what to do with that information. Ethan had spent so long believing Ryan was untouchable that seeing him hesitate felt almost impossible. The guy who could walk into any room and instantly become the center of attention was now standing outside a small coffee shop, waiting for Ethan to decide if he wanted to come inside. It was strangely comforting. "You know, for someone who looks like he has everything figured out, you are really bad at pretending you are not nervous," Ethan said. Ryan looked at him and smiled. "For someone who jokes every time he gets uncomfortable, you are really good at noticing things." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because Ryan was right. He always had a joke ready. A funny comment. A quick distraction. Anything to stop people from seeing how much he actually cared. Their weekend together was supposed to be casual. At least, that was what Ethan told himself. They walked through a local street market, shared coffee, and spent hours talking about things they had never mentioned before. Ryan talked about how exhausting it was to always be the person everyone expected to succeed. Ethan admitted that he often acted confident because he was afraid people would notice how unsure he felt. Somehow, between random conversations and quiet moments, the distance between them started disappearing. But college had a way of turning simple things into complicated ones. By Monday morning, everyone had noticed they were spending time together. The whispers started again. Friends smiled whenever Ethan and Ryan entered the same room. People made jokes about the two of them finally admitting what everyone else had already guessed. Ethan laughed along, but a small part of him wondered if Ryan felt embarrassed. Later that afternoon, Ethan overheard a conversation near the gym. Ryan was talking with some teammates, and Ethan stopped when he heard his name. "So, are you finally admitting you actually like him?" someone asked. Ethan waited for Ryan's answer. A part of him expected Ryan to laugh it off, to say it was all because of the dare, to remind everyone that this started as a joke. Instead, Ryan said, "I do not know what this is yet." Ethan felt his smile disappear. He did not hear the rest. He walked away before he could. The sentence followed him all evening. "I do not know what this is yet." Somehow, those words hurt more than a clear answer would have. Ethan told himself he was being dramatic. After all, Ryan had never promised anything. They were just two people figuring things out. But Ethan had started hoping. And hope was dangerous when you were not sure if someone felt the same way. The next day, Ryan found him outside the art building. "You have been avoiding me," Ryan said. Ethan looked away. "I have been busy." Ryan studied him carefully. "That is not true." Ethan sighed. "Maybe I just do not want to be another thing you are unsure about." The words came out before he could stop them. Ryan looked surprised, almost hurt. "Ethan, that is not what I meant." But Ethan was already walking away. He did not know that Ryan was about to reveal the one thing he had been afraid to say. He did not know that the story they started by accident was about to become something neither of them could pretend was a game anymore. Ryan did not follow Ethan immediately. He knew better than that. Ethan was the kind of person who needed space when he felt overwhelmed, even if he pretended he did not. That was one of the first things Ryan had learned about him. Ethan could make an entire room laugh, but when it came to his own feelings, he always tried to hide behind a joke. The next few days felt different. Not because Ryan stopped caring, but because Ethan stopped letting him get close. Their conversations became shorter. Their usual jokes disappeared. The empty space between them felt much louder than any argument could have been. Ryan hated it more than he expected. He had spent years being calm under pressure. Exams, competitions, important decisions, none of those things bothered him the way seeing Ethan walk away did. Meanwhile, Ethan tried convincing himself that he was fine. He returned to his usual routine, sketching after classes, drinking coffee while pretending he was not checking his phone every few minutes, telling his friends he was not thinking about Ryan when everyone clearly knew he was. "You know you are terrible at pretending you do not care, right?" his friend Marcus said one afternoon. Ethan looked up from his sketchbook. "I do not know what you mean." Marcus pointed at the page. "You have been drawing the same person for 20 minutes. Ethan looked down and immediately closed the sketchbook. He did not need to see the unfinished drawing to know who it was. That evening, Ethan received a message from Ryan. It was simple. "Can we talk?" Ethan stared at the screen for a long time. Every part of him wanted to say yes. Another part reminded him how embarrassing it felt to admit he wanted something that Ryan might not be ready to give. Still, the next day, he agreed to meet. They sat on a quiet bench near the campus garden, away from the noise of students walking between classes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ryan finally said, "I think I owe you the truth." Ethan looked at him carefully. "That sounds serious." Ryan gave a small smile. "It is." He took a breath. "When everyone started joking about us after that night, I thought I could ignore it. I thought I could treat it like everyone else did. Just a funny story." Ethan looked away. And now, Ryan's expression changed. The confident smile was gone. "Now I realize I was lying to myself." Ethan stayed quiet. Ryan continued, "The dare was not what made me notice you. I noticed you before that." Those words made Ethan look back at him. "What?" Ryan laughed softly, almost embarrassed. "You think I never saw you sitting alone in the library and making everyone around you laugh? You think I never noticed you helping people even when nobody was watching?" Ethan did not know what to say, because for once, Ryan was the one who looked nervous. "I was not unsure about you," Ryan said. "I was unsure about whether I deserved to change something that felt so unexpected." The silence between them felt different now. Not empty, not uncomfortable, just honest. Ethan finally smiled a little. "You really are terrible at explaining your feelings." Ryan smiled back. "I know." And for the first time in days, Ethan laughed. The problem was no longer whether they had started as a joke. The real question was whether they were brave enough to admit what came after. After that conversation in the campus garden, something between Ethan and Ryan finally felt different. Not perfect, not simple, but real. For the first time, Ethan stopped wondering if every smile, every message, and every small moment meant something. Ryan had finally said what Ethan needed to hear, and somehow that honesty felt more powerful than any grand gesture could have been. Still, Ethan was Ethan. He did not suddenly become fearless overnight. He was still the guy who overthought every text message and replayed conversations in his head like a movie director searching for hidden clues. Ryan noticed. Of course he noticed. Ryan had become surprisingly good at noticing everything about him. One afternoon, Ethan was sitting outside the art building, staring at a blank page for almost 15 minutes. Ryan walked by, looked at the empty sketchbook, and smiled. "Are you drawing or having a staring contest with paper?" Ethan looked up. "The paper is winning." Ryan laughed. "That might be the most honest thing you have ever said." Ethan shook his head, but he smiled. Moments like that became normal. They started spending more time together without needing an excuse. No dare, no audience, no reason to pretend. They found small routines that belonged only to them. Ryan would bring an extra coffee because he knew Ethan always forgot to order one before morning classes. Ethan would save the best seat in the library because he knew Ryan liked the quiet corner near the window. They were little things, but little things were what made Ethan realize this was not about one dramatic moment. It was about all the moments after. One Friday evening, Ryan invited Ethan to a basketball game. Ethan usually avoided large crowds, but he went anyway. He sat in the stands wearing a team jacket Ryan had given him, and for once, he did not feel like he was pretending to belong. After the game, Ryan found him outside near the campus lights. You actually came, Ryan said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You invited me. Ryan smiled. I know. I just did not think you would enjoy it. Ethan looked around at the emptying stadium. I did not understand the rules for the first half. Ryan laughed. I noticed. But I liked seeing you happy. The words came out naturally, and Ethan immediately realized how honest they sounded. Ryan became quiet for a moment. Then he said, You know you do that a lot, right? Do what? You say things that make people feel important. Ethan looked away, suddenly shy. I do not think I do. Ryan stepped closer, not in a dramatic way, just enough to make sure Ethan knew he was serious. You do. For a while, they stood there without saying anything. The campus was quieter now, the evening air cool, the lights glowing above them. Ethan realized something important. He had spent so much time worrying about how their story started that he forgot to appreciate how it was growing. But not everyone around them understood that. Some people still saw the beginning as a joke. Some people still believed everything between them was just a temporary college moment. And soon, Ethan would discover that one person from their past was about to bring that doubt back again. For a while, Ethan believed the hardest part of their story was admitting their feelings. He was wrong. The hardest part was realizing that not everyone would see what they saw. To Ethan and Ryan, every conversation, every shared laugh, and every quiet moment had become something meaningful. But to some people, the beginning was still just a joke. A few weeks later, the university hosted its annual spring event. The campus was filled with music, food stands, and students enjoying the warm afternoon. Ethan was helping at an art booth when he noticed Ryan talking with someone near the entrance. At first, he smiled. Then he recognized the person standing beside him. It was Tyler Brooks, one of Ryan's old teammates. Tyler was the person who had started the original game at the party. The person who had turned a simple night into something everyone talked about. Ethan tried not to listen, but then he heard his name. I still cannot believe that little challenge actually worked, Tyler joked. Ethan froze. The words felt heavier than they should have. He looked toward Ryan, waiting for him to correct him, waiting for him to say that it was not like that anymore. Ryan's expression changed immediately. Tyler, that is not funny. But Ethan barely heard the rest. His mind was already filling in the blanks. The doubts he had tried to ignore suddenly returned. What if Ryan had only gotten close to him because of that night? What if the feelings that seemed real had started from something that was never serious? Ethan walked away before Ryan noticed him. He told himself he just needed a moment, just a little time to think. But the truth was, he was hurt. Not because of the dare itself. Not because their story started in an unexpected way. He was hurt because he finally trusted something completely. And now he was afraid he had been the only one who did. That evening, Ryan found him sitting outside the art building, the same place where they had shared so many conversations before. Ethan, Ryan said gently. Ethan looked up. How long were you planning to let me believe this was all just a funny story? Ryan immediately understood. You heard Tyler. It was not a question. Ethan looked away. Was he wrong? Ryan sat beside him, leaving enough space between them. Yes. Ethan waited for more, but Ryan stayed quiet for a moment. The dare was real. The challenge happened. I cannot change that. Ethan nodded slowly. That is what I thought. Ryan shook his head. But you are confusing where something started with what it became. Those words made Ethan look at him. Ryan continued. A moment can begin unexpectedly and still become something honest. Ethan wanted to believe him. He really did. But fear was louder than hope. Then why did you never tell me? Ryan looked down. Because I was afraid. Ethan almost laughed. You? Afraid? Ryan smiled sadly. Yes. Because I knew the moment I admitted I cared, I could lose you. For the first time, Ethan saw that Ryan was not trying to defend himself. He was trying to be understood. But the hurt was still there. And before they could fix everything, Ethan had to decide whether he was willing to trust the person who had changed his life. For the first time since meeting Ryan, Ethan did not know what to say. Usually, words came easily to him. He could turn an awkward moment into a joke, hide his worries behind a smile, and make everyone around him feel comfortable. But sitting there with Ryan, he realized there were some feelings that could not be covered with humor. I need to understand something, Ethan said quietly. Ryan looked at him. Anything. Ethan took a breath. If that night never happened, would you have still talked to me? The question stayed between them. Ryan did not answer immediately. Not because he did not know, but because he wanted to choose the right words. Yes, Ryan finally said. I would have. Ethan searched his expression, looking for any sign that he was only saying what Ethan wanted to hear. There was none. I noticed you before the party, Ryan continued. You always helped people without expecting anything back. You made jokes when everyone else was stressed. You were the only person who treated me like I was just Ryan, not the basketball player everyone wanted something from. Ethan looked down at his hands. He had spent so much time thinking Ryan was impossible to reach that he never considered Ryan might feel the same way about him. Then why did you agree to the dare? Ethan asked. Ryan smiled slightly. Because I was curious. Curious? You looked at me like you already knew my worst qualities. Ethan laughed softly. That is because I thought you had a secret room where you kept your confidence. Ryan laughed too. It was a small moment, but it reminded Ethan why he had fallen for him in the first place. Ryan was not just the person everyone admired. He was the person who made Ethan feel seen. The next few days were not magically perfect. They still had conversations they needed to have. They still had moments where they misunderstood each other. But this time, they did not run away. They chose to talk. They chose to be honest. One evening, Ethan and Ryan walked through campus after their last classes. The sky was turning orange, and the quiet streets felt completely different from the crowded party where everything began. Do you ever think about how strange this is? Ethan asked. Ryan looked over. What? That we went from barely talking to this. Ryan smiled. I think about it a lot. Ethan laughed. That is surprising. I thought you only thought about basketball and your perfect schedule. Ryan shook his head. No, I think about you more than you realize. Ethan stopped walking for a moment. Ryan noticed and turned back. What? Ethan smiled. Nothing. I just never expected you to become the person who knows how to make me speechless. Ryan looked pleased. That is probably the biggest achievement of my life. Ethan rolled his eyes, but he was smiling. For the first time, he stopped worrying about how their story looked to everyone else. Their beginning was complicated. Their timing was unexpected. But the connection between them was real. However, just as Ethan started believing they had finally moved past the uncertainty, an unexpected opportunity appeared that would test everything they had built together. The opportunity arrived sooner than Ethan expected. It started with an email from the university art department announcing a summer program in New York City. It was the kind of opportunity Ethan had dreamed about since he was a kid. A chance to meet other artists, display his work, and spend several weeks surrounded by creativity. Normally, he would have been excited. Instead, he stared at the message on his laptop and immediately thought about what it would mean for him and Ryan. The program lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks away from campus. 6 weeks away from the person who had become the most important part of his everyday life. When Ryan found out, he was nothing but supportive. You have to go, Ryan said. Ethan looked at him carefully. That was very quick. Ryan smiled. Because I know you. You have talked about something like this for years. Ethan laughed softly. You were supposed to make this harder for me. Why would I do that? Ryan asked. Because that is what people do when they are afraid of losing something. The words surprised Ethan because they were exactly what he had been thinking. Ryan had always seemed confident, but Ethan was beginning to understand that confidence did not mean someone never felt afraid. It only meant they learned how to handle it. Still, the closer the departure date came, the more complicated Ethan felt. He worried that distance would change things. He worried that 6 weeks apart would remind them how unexpected their relationship had been. Maybe they were only perfect because they were together every day. Maybe without the campus, the routines, and the familiar places, everything would feel different. Ryan noticed the change immediately. One evening, they sat together near the campus garden where they had once had their most honest conversation. You are thinking too much again, Ryan said. Ethan sighed. Is it that obvious? To me, yes. Ethan smiled a little. What if things change? Ryan looked at him. They will. Ethan looked surprised. That is not the comforting answer I expected. Ryan laughed. Change is not always a bad thing. We are not the same people we were when we met. Ethan thought about that. Ryan was right. The person who started this story was someone who believed he had to hide behind jokes. Ryan was someone who believed he had to always appear perfect. Somehow, they had both become more honest because of each other. I just do not want to lose this, Ethan admitted. Ryan's expression softened. Then do not treat it like something fragile. Ethan looked at him. What do you mean? I mean, we do not stop caring just because we are not standing in the same place. That sentence stayed with Ethan. The day before he left, Ryan gave him a small notebook. Ethan opened it and found empty pages. A sketchbook. Ethan asked. Ryan shook his head. A reminder. Of what? That there are still things we have not written yet. Ethan smiled because somehow Ryan, the person who used to struggle expressing emotions, had become the person who knew exactly what to say. The next morning, Ethan left for New York. As the city disappeared behind the airplane window, he felt nervous, excited, and hopeful all at once. He did not know what the next 6 weeks would bring. But for the first time, he was not afraid of the unknown. Because he finally understood that a real connection was not measured by how close two people stood. It was measured by whether they chose each other, even when life created distance. 6 weeks passed faster than Ethan expected. When he first arrived in New York City, everything felt overwhelming. The streets were louder, the buildings seemed endless, and every corner looked like a scene from a movie. It was exciting, but it was also strange not having Ryan beside him. For the first few days, Ethan kept reaching for his phone whenever something interesting happened. A funny sign on the street. A beautiful piece of artwork in a small gallery. A coffee shop that reminded him of their favorite place near campus. Every time, he wanted to share it with Ryan. Then he remembered they were thousands of miles apart. But Ryan never made the distance feel empty. They talked every night. Sometimes they had long conversations about their days. Sometimes they simply stayed on the phone while doing their own things. Ethan realized that connection was not always about constant excitement. Sometimes it was about knowing someone was there. Near the end of the program, Ethan prepared his final art presentation. His project was a collection of drawings inspired by ordinary moments that changed his life. A coffee cup left on a desk. A quiet walk across campus. A person sitting beside him when he thought he had to face everything alone. When his mentor asked what inspired the collection, Ethan smiled. Someone reminded me that the smallest moments can become the most important ones. He did not mention Ryan by name, but he did not need to. The meaning was already there. When Ethan returned to campus, he expected things to feel different. He expected to feel like he had changed. And he had. But the first thing he noticed was Ryan waiting outside the student center, holding 2 coffees. Ethan stopped walking. Ryan smiled. "You are late." Ethan looked at the coffee in his hand. "You still remembered my order?" Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You really thought I would forget?" Ethan laughed. It was such a familiar moment, yet somehow it felt completely new. They walked across campus together, talking about everything they had missed. The funny moments, the difficult moments, the things they had learned while apart. Eventually, they reached the place where everything had started. The same campus area where a simple challenge had brought them closer. Ethan looked around and smiled. "It is strange being here again." Ryan nodded. "A lot has changed." Ethan looked at him. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if that night never happened?" Ryan thought for a moment. "Maybe we would have taken longer to find each other." Ethan smiled. "That sounds like something you would say." Ryan laughed. "Probably." They stood there for a moment, remembering the version of themselves who had no idea what was coming. Ethan remembered the nervous jokes. Ryan remembered the uncertainty, the misunderstanding, the moments where they almost walked away. But they also remembered choosing to stay. Because sometimes the most unexpected beginnings create the strongest connections. Years later, Ethan would still remember that first night, not because of the challenge itself, but because it introduced him to someone who changed the way he saw love, trust, and himself. What started as a simple moment became a story neither of them could have written alone. And in the end, the best part was not how they found each other. It was how they continued choosing each other every day after.